Hey there, Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Frank Hammer. He is a retired worker with the United Auto Workers Local 909. That was in Warren, Michigan. You were there for quite some time. I believe transmission parts, correct?
We assembled transmissions.
Yeah.
And we had history even before that, but yes.
And very active in United Auto Workers through good times, bad times, ugly times. So you're a bit of a historian. I met you back in 2019 when General Motors laid off 15,000 workers and later ended up in a strike. So I thought it'd be great. Obviously, the looming strike now is about current workers, but retirees as well. And, you know, this is exciting times if you are a current worker or a retiree. Because I would say the UAW, like a lot of unions in America, has for long been in the wilderness and also had some issues with corruption. So let's start with kind of where things stand now. Would the current militancy we're seeing and the real increase in terms of demanding more, would that have been possible without the reforms at the UAW in terms of direct representation elections, which happened earlier this year?
So nobody in the UAW, and I'm including the folks that were involved in reforming the UAW, thought we would be here as we are today. This has been a dramatic turnaround. And a lot of it has to do with the corruption that you mentioned earlier, where the leadership of the UAW, and you pointed out, it's been two presidents that really lost their way and thought they were going to be just like managers and act like managers and be corrupt. So that was the trigger that the reform movement had been working for years to change the UAW, gave the reformers an opening, and really went ahead and championed the direct elections by rank and file workers instead of it being done as an appointment procedure in the conventions, which is what it became. But we've been fighting for number one vote for a long time. We won. The reform movement won 2-1. Small percentage of UAW members have voted, but we won. And shortly thereafter, we saw the reform movement field a slate of candidates in 7 of the 14 positions on the International Executive Board. Each one of them won their elections. Not one lost. And I have to say, UAW members at large weren't familiar necessarily with the people that they elected, but they had enough, and they really wanted a change. And they elected a new president. It was by a small margin, but if that new president, Shawn Fain, and the new executive board is bringing us to the moment where we are now, talking about fighting back, fighting for what was lost, and fighting in regards to what's coming. And I think that for the UAW rank and file, it is so refreshing to see this and to begin to identify with the UAW that they want to identify with. And that's what's happening.
You know, what's interesting to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like what Fain has been doing, obviously you have, more populist, progressive talk, but also I think he's been doing a much better job, and obviously leadership with him, of informing workers using numbers, charts that are just very clear. I mean, I just saw one video where he's showing the stock buybacks for Ford, that it's 150% increase and things like that. I think workers kind of knew they were being screwed, but didn't know the exact numbers and to the degree. Can you kind of talk about the communication, which is much different? In the past, UAW leadership was behind closed doors, a lot of rumors and just speculation about what was being offered. Now it seems everybody kind of knows what's being offered, what's not being offered, and putting a dollar amount to how bad the companies are basically stealing your labor.
I think that what Sean Fain has done, and keep in mind, I mean, this isn't all in a very short time. I mean, he only got elected earlier this year. What was it? March, April. You know, I mean, it was like, so to be able to turn things around from where they were in this short amount of time is nothing but extraordinary. And you're hitting on something that I think is very key to all of it, and that is there's a two-way communication going on with the UAW leadership and Sean Fain and the rank and file. So yesterday, Sean Fain had another one of his streams, live streams on Facebook, and bringing the membership up to date, letting the rank and file know where things are at. Here's what Ford offered. Ford's the only one that's made an offer. Here's what we're contending. And I noticed that there must have been over 1,000 members who chimed in response to what he was, the information he was laying out. So it's really two-way. And the rank and file, you can tell by all their posts that people are hurting, all the way from young workers who are making $16 an hour, $16.50 an hour, to the retirees who for 17 years haven't seen any raise in their pension. But there also is an air of excitement, and I think he's helping to generate that by saying, I'm going to come directly to you and talk to you about what's going on. And that's absolutely refreshing.
Can you talk about, because you see the media, I mean, you got CNBC and the rest of these corporate ghouls, they're just leading with what I think they think is a obscene request of upwards of 40% wage increases. But it's a little deceiving because, I mean, you've given back wages over the last definitely 10 years after the financial crash, but even 20 years. I mean, workers have given back a lot of their wages, plus, more in terms of paying for healthcare, pensions. So it's not really 40%, because baked into that is wages that you already gave back. Can you kind of talk about that history in terms of how much in concessions UAW workers have given over the last 10 or so years?
So, first of all, the fact that they were able to split our ranks into what they call legacy workers or tier one, and this whole new set of classifications. It's a caste system. We talk about the caste in India, so we have a caste system in what's been done through the companies to us, so that the idea that workers are coming in and making $16.50 an hour, and that's supposed to be quote unquote a middle class job, is nonsense. But in the restructuring, and that's what it was in the wake of the financial crisis. The financial crisis was used as a shock to the system. It was a shock to the UAW. It was a shock to our country as a whole. And in the midst of the shock, per the script laid out by Naomi Klein in her book, Shock Doctrine, the companies took advantage of it. And they froze the wages of rank and file workers. Legacy workers have not seen a raise in years. We saw the end of COLA. They suspended COLA. New future retirees would not get health care. They would not get a pension. So all these things were restructured into what it meant to be an auto worker in this past decade. And to the idea that workers want to recoup what was taken away from them is only natural. They're putting in an incredible number of hours per week, and they've got little to show for it. And so workers are saying, enough is enough. We need to be able to keep up with the cost of living. We need to be able to have wages that we can sustain on one job, never mind trying to work 40 hours or less. So, if you look at 40 or 46% in that regard, that's just catch up. It's catch up. And the companies have had no problems paying the CEOs those increases during these years. And so, flag that out there as well. And yeah, workers are going to get angry.
Right. And could you also address, you see in the reporting they're trying to make it seem like almost like the unions are standing in the way of the, necessary shift to electric and clean energy, that the unions are, expecting more for, a manufacturing process that requires less workers, and that, the climate catastrophe should be more important to the unions. But from what I get is, no, the unions are all for a shift to electric and clean energy, but they're not going to be, left at the economic altar to do so. A lot of these companies we saw in Lordstown, them try to kind of through the back door, make a lot of these battery plant non-unions. So how do you respond, and how to workers you talk to now that say, well, we don't need as many workers to make these electric cars, and we can't pay you the amount for a car, a traditional gas-fueled car?
So I think that my hat's off to the leadership of the UAW. Taking on the climate crisis is in some quarters in the UAW still, it's kind of like a no-no because people feel their jobs are threatened. And I think more education can be done about why we have to cope with the climate crisis, but the UAW is well on its way. And I want to add, and get back to your question, but I want to add that recently there was a webinar with like 6 climate crisis organizations like Sierra Club, the other, some of the other groups that are coming out now in support of the UAW's demand for a just transition. And this is a wonderful merger of the labor movement with the environmental movement on issues that matter to workers, and it matters to the environmental movement. So the idea that companies are wanting to take advantage of the transition by paying workers less and establishing a new tier is completely counterproductive. We all need to be on board with the transition, dealing with the climate catastrophe. And what more visuals do you want than what we saw, what happened in the incredible fires due to the drought conditions in Maui, or all the incredible forest fires that have been going on and on and on in Canada due to the drought because of the warming of the planet, or just recently, Idalia in Florida. So I think we all got to be on board. And in this moment, Biden ought to be telling the companies, don't be trying to take advantage of the UAW workers. Give them their just due, because we need to do this all together to address the climate crisis and protect our planet.
Well, what's also interesting to me is, again, I mean, these companies are making billion-dollar profits, but the government seems to, we need to incentivize them to do the right thing. I mean, they're getting free money. Yes, China has done similar in terms of incentivizing electric vehicle purchases, things like that. But I mean, Ford just got one of the most lavish, generous subsidies for electric. But then these companies are turning around and saying, well, they can't be union shops, or, we can't pay what we pay at the traditional factories. Just seems like they're getting free money and then turning around and screwing the workers. So,
and Sean Fain, very early on when he became president, said, directed his comments to the Biden administration saying, it's all well and good that you want to assist the companies in making the conversion. But you, who are touted as a pro-labor president, this is your moment to come forward and say, we're not gonna do this. We're not going to assist the companies without making sure that the workers get their just due and get the incomes and salaries and benefits that they deserve and they require. So I think that that hasn't come forward, and we have to be mindful that the administration that imposed the restructuring on the UAW back in 2009, 2010. That Biden was part of that administration, and he's got to come forward and say, okay, we got through that rough period. Now we're sailing. The companies have now got to come forward and the UAW wants the battery plants to be part of the master agreement with all the other UAW members at the Detroit 3. That's the demand, and that's what UAW has put forward. And Biden should respond to that.
Can you talk about also over the last decade or so, as concessions have been made? We know the horror stories in terms of Amazon workers. I mean, they're clocked to the very last second. They got to pee in bottles, poop in their trucks. But you hear horror stories about workers. I just read Kentucky workers talking about, we're like zombies walking around, people with back problems, people working 12-hour shifts, the extraordinary breaking down of your body to do these jobs. And all these factories, they've only wanted more, quicker productivity over the last decade or so.
So we know that Amazon has a labor model where they intend for workers to last 3-4 years, young workers. They don't intend for these workers at Amazon to be long-term workers, retire from Amazon. That's the model. That's the labor model. And the labor model that the auto companies are going up to is in that direction. So you have a clause in the agreement that allows them under certain situations to declare some kind of an emergency. And clearly they probably regard strike preparations as an emergency. But they have a provision where they can work workers 90 days in a row, 12 hours a day. Never mind, some workers might want to go to church on Sunday. It don't matter. And to try to do 12-hour shifts for 90 days, I think any one of us can imagine what a challenge that is for even young workers. And, when I worked in the plant, I mean, we have voluntary overtime. They can mandate us an extra hour a day, and look where we are now, where workers are not able to live a life. They're not able to be with their families. They're not able to, none of that. Now they're just, this is like, nope, you're automatons and you're going to work 90 days straight. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I think that, this is not acceptable, and it's got to change, because the Amazon model, like you were describing, is not going to last, and Amazon will get organized. It might take a little longer, but Amazon will get organized because workers won't put up with it.
And also, can you talk about, I mean, obviously there's been strikes in the past, but Fain, the UAW president now, this new militant attitude, I mean, unless he's going to fold, which I don't see happening easily, it does not seem, as we stand today, Labor Day, this is airing, that this could be a prolonged strike. And obviously, after the first week or two of energy, some pain sets in. And then the media, we know, often looks at the economic harm more so than, the actual workers that are striking. Can you talk about what do you see as different? Why would UAW workers, are they prepared and might be able to strike for the long term? Obviously, nobody wants to. But do you see this as them having the infrastructure and with Fain's leadership to do this for the long haul, if these companies who right now are working these workers to death to have reserves for preparation of that strike, is UAW prepared for a long strike?
So, I was when we had the 40-day strike at GM in 2019, I thought it was really extraordinary that workers were really determined then, even under that leadership, to fight for a stronger contract. And I was particularly impressed by the seniority workers, the legacy workers, how much they were coming out to the picket lines, and they came out to the picket line of my plant, determined to bring up the second tier and the contract workers to their status, and which to me was the kind of labor union solidarity that you're looking for. So I witnessed that. I mean, it was very evident. And in the case of my plant, we had Ford workers, we had Chrysler workers who came and joined our picket line. And, it got pretty frosty by December. And I'll be damned if workers weren't absolutely determined to continue to see that struggle through. And I think that they probably were a bit disappointed with the results of that strike. But that's in a lot of people's memory. And so that's kind of like, yeah, we've gone through that experience and we know what it's like. But we have leadership now that's really more determined than it was then. So I think workers will be, and especially the younger workers will be taking this up and persevering. I would add that the rest of the labor movement has to come in. I went on the AFL-CIO website today and see, well, what kind of support is the AFL-CIO giving on a national level? And all they announced was the strike vote and a little bit about what the demands were, but they need to be mobilizing labor in support of the UAW. The fate of the UAW is going to have a lot to do with the fate of the rest of the unions in the AFL. And so we're having Labor Day. We're going to have a parade. And here in Detroit, it'll be the first time since 2019. And it'd be great if the other unions that are in the Metro AFL-CIO really came out and said, we're going to support the UAW every which way we can. And we saw some of that in 2019. It'll have to be stepped up and really understand that this is not just a UAW fight. This is a working class fight. And I want to add a little story that you might enjoy. So I was at a panel recently about this contract. And a worker was there, a young worker from Kroger's. And I learned Kroger's has got 3 tiers.
Yep.
It's just throughout the whole worker structure, throughout the country. But he said that the Kroger workers he was with was in a break area. And it was just at that moment that Shawn Fain was speaking and put the Chrysler offer, the Stellantis offer, in the trash. And apparently it was all kinds of, pounding on the table when that happened. And so the message is reaching out way beyond the UAW. This is a working class struggle. And the AFL-CIO has to respond and bring these other workers into the fight in support of the UAW.
Well, they're too busy endorsing Biden way too early after Biden has really done nothing but give some, virtue signaling. That was my next question. Listen, at the end of the day, Biden can say whatever he wants. I'm not trying to get too political. His record speaks for itself. It is not pro-union, in my opinion. He says a lot of lunchbox, average Joe kind of stuff. But I haven't seen a lot. His administration has at least had more positive action as far as the National Labor Relations Board. But there was not a lot of action in terms of pushing or promoting the PRO Act, trying to even get that pushed over the finish line. Other than some, here and there, workers have a right to organize, hasn't been a lot of talk as far as Amazon's union busting, Starbucks union busting, which is really, in my view, criminal in both cases. But bottom line is we're in the full swing of an election season now. And obviously, Joe Biden does not want, a prolonged strike of blue collar workers that he's hoping a lot of them will be in his column. How does that kind of affect this? Obviously, for current workers, their focus is on their jobs and wages and families. But obviously, there will be backdoor behind the scenes. The White House will be involved, I would say. Yeah,
and I want to second Shawn Fain's position. They articulated more than once that, he's saying, we'll support Biden, but under certain conditions. But then he added that Trump would be a disaster for UAW members and workers in general, which I was very glad that he did. And I think we have to be very, very clear. When anybody thinks that Trump is some kind of an alternative, never mind its criminality, that Trump...
Well, go ask the workers in Lordstown who he said, you know, don't go anywhere, don't move. This factory is not going anywhere.
You know, Trump back in 2016, he was in an interview with NBC, and he made very clear not only his own position, but the position of the whole capitalist class, and that is shut down the factories in the unionized sector of the country. You don't have to even move it to Mexico. Move it to a non-union location, open it up there. And you know what? Down the road, them workers that you shut down their factory that were union, when you bring that work back, they'll be glad to take, you know, a third of the wages. And that is their strategy. And Trump was laying it out. And I thought the capitalists had to be really embarrassed by Trump putting that out there, because that's been their strategy for the last 40 years. So workers today are supposed to be happy with $15, $16, $17 an hour. When I retired, workers were making $32 an hour. So Biden has to certainly do more to step up to the plate than ask for a fair contract, whatever that is. But we have to be very, very clear that Trump is no alternative, and the right wing is no alternative to auto workers. So we got to keep on pressing and fighting for an administration that's going to be really responsive to working class issues. Otherwise, people won't go and vote.
Right. Absolutely. And can you talk about, from the retirees' perspective, obviously, you know, focuses on current workers, but I mean, you guys aren't rolling in it. You don't have, an endless supply under your pillow of Benjamins, and inflation is really, really difficult. And we basically have had a 10 to 20 year inflation. It's called gentrification. Talk to me as a retiree, other retirees, you know, at various locals. It's getting tough to live off that pension.
So in regards to my own local, you know, our plant was shut down in 2019. That's one of the plants that UAW said it was going to fight to keep open, and it was shut down. It's now been demolished. It's been replaced by a warehouse. Our local is closed. Our building was sold. But the retirees still persist, and we meet. And in the lead up to this, the negotiations, the retirees are very concerned. They lost their Christmas bonus. Might not be a big thing to people, but it's a big thing for retirees. And they have not seen a raise in their pensions to match the cost of living for 17 years. And, you know, it's, what do we need to say about, these are workers who, you know, dedicated their lives to the company. They're the ones that kept, you know, it wasn't the foreman, it wasn't the general supervisor, it wasn't the manager. It was the workers on the line that made things work. And so the retirees who did report in all that work, they should be recognized that they can't just be thrown out and dismissed, that they have needs as well, and the companies need to come forward, even though, you know, they'll claim, well, legally, that's not a subject of mandatory bargaining. Well, excuse me, but your retirees are hurting, and it's time to cough up.
And last question, I think you raised it, but I've been saying for the last couple of weeks as I've been covering this, you know, this seems bigger to me than just the auto industry. There seems to be something in the air of, you know, just people at their breaking point, and people saying, we got to fight back harder, even if that comes at risk to ourselves. Kind of a working class, fighting back, realizing finally, you know, the rescue choppers are not coming from either party or DC. Can you kind of talk about, obviously you can't really put it in words. I've covered picket lines. You've been out there. There's a energy and a solidarity and a love out there. But do you think that this could kind of have a domino effect if there is a strike? You know, even if it's not physically 150,000 workers, you get, 30, 40,000 workers across the country physically out there. Canada workers might be going on strike at a similar time. Could that have a domino effect for other industries, other workers, and the entire country?
So I think that we're kind of already into a domino effect. We had the John Deere strike, we had the Volvo strike, we had a variety of strikes. I'm just talking about UAW, but elsewhere. And there seems to be an emergence of a working class movement. And that will have an incredible spillover. In 2019, we saw small businesses in the Detroit area that were pitching in. And I mean, they would be bringing like 40 cartons of pizza to the picket line. And these are small businesses that are very much relate to the plight of workers, because they know their livelihood is at stake as well. And I think that we're going to see that. I think that I've seen support statements already from various groups here in Detroit, non-auto, but who identify with auto. And I think I think the message that Shawn Fain is putting out is reaching a lot of ears, well beyond. And like I was giving that example earlier of just workers at Kroger who are responding to the message. And I want to say, I look at this from an international perspective. In 2019, I don't know how many auto workers know that GM workers in Mexico were in solidarity with our GM strike here at home. And they resisted forced overtime. They resisted speed up. Some got fired. And that show of solidarity from across the border is probably something that we're going to see grow as well. And we should nurture it. And we, in turn, should be expressing our solidarity with a GM worker that happens to speak a language that's not different from ours, Spanish, but he or she are fighting for the same things that we are. And the sooner and the quicker that we unify and we work together to collaborate with each other, and the kind of example that they set in 2019 in Silao, Mexico, we're going to be stronger. And I look forward to that day when we're on solidarity in multiple countries. And I think you just had a report on, we're potentially going to be out maybe with Canadian workers. And maybe we can expand that and grow that to Ford in Europe or to GM in Mexico. We'll see.
Yeah, about 18,000 workers represented by Unifor in Canada. Their contract ends, I believe, 4 or 5 days after UAW in America. So that could be potentially at the same time. There is a bridge to Canada, so maybe I'll bring my passport, cover both. One more. Bottom line, to me, it seems that you really have this pivot now with Shawn Fain and the current moment. What do you need? What would you like to see from people who are not in the auto industry? How can other people get involved, even if they are not technically picketing for their jobs? Because I think in all these cases, it's important, whether it's people who are climate activists, healthcare activists, whatever part of the working class or progressive movement. You don't even have to be progressive. Plenty of conservatives who are union members. As a UAW retiree, but you're still kind of involved, how do other people support? How do other people get involved?
Well, I think I want to say that the environmentalists, the climate activists, have really shown they're leading the way. They came out in full support of the workers demanding a just transition, and it would be absolutely awesome to see that grow. And I recall, I think it was when we were fighting against the TPP, that there were, if I'm not mistaken, well over 1,000 organizations that were banding together against that particular free trade agreement, and we were able to defeat it. But it takes that kind of broad unity, and I think So I think organizations stepping up and expressing the solidarity, you know, making sure that's in the airwaves, that UAW is not acting alone. And I think that should the pickets begin on the 15th of September, that certainly people are welcome to join the pickets. People are welcome to begin build like soup kitchens and the like, help out with UAW locals that will be doing soup kitchens for picketing workers, especially as the time gets on. One thing I would add is that the UAW rank and file came to the convention in March. I think it was, yeah. And anyway, they made a motion at the convention that got passed to increase the strike pay. And I want to say that was a radical change, because during the 2019 strike, strikers were getting, I think, $250 or $275 a week. And that's been almost doubled. So UAW members will have a little bit more support and cushion, but that still means that we'll need to do all kinds of things. And hey, come out and show up for Labor Day. That'd be a great thing.
Absolutely. Frank Hammer, thank you as always for taking the time. Retiree, UAW, Local 909 there in Warren, Michigan. And I look forward to, God willing, seeing you on the picket lines when I'm there to cover it.
I enjoyed having you in Detroit in 2019, man. We look forward to it again.
All right. Take care.